There were two very important rulings from the Supreme Court that could change the political landscape of America. The court overturned the conviction of the former governor of Virginia, Bob McDonnell. We're going to go in depth on that story in just a minute.
Well, the court also struck down a Texas law that required abortion clinics to meet safety standards similar to those of hospitals for outpatient surgery. Abigail Robertson has this look at the reaction to the High Court's ruling in that case.
Hundreds awaited as a dramatic day played out at the Supreme Court. The issue, abortion and the Texas access law that closed all but a handful of clinics there over failure to meet state health standards. In ruling against the Texas law, pro-life advocates criticized the court for missing an opportunity to protect women.
It's extremely disappointing to see 5 unelected and unaccountable justices make this decision that hurts women. This case is about women's health and safety standards, and they have refused to protect women. And this is going to mean that more women are going to continue to be hurt and even die in these abortion facilities.
Pro-choice supporters argue facilities are safe enough, and their concern is over access.
I believe that the fact that the laws have made it so there's so few abortion clinics proves the fact that the laws are making a lower access to abortion versus making it safer abortions. So I believe that access is really important, and I'm really happy that we won.
Justices in the majority felt the Texas regulations pose an obstacle to women seeking abortions and could force women in dire circumstances to seek out unlicensed practitioners.
Basically, he said that these were new standards. He ignored the fact that they were consistent with the standards that were applied by Texas to outpatient surgical facilities across the board. And he said they just simply closed too many clinics.
Lawyers for the Texas state law are discouraged by the loss, but think many clinics will remain closed because the overall demand for abortion is decreasing.
The reason that clinics are closing by and large across the country is because abortion is more and more unpopular. That's a wonderful thing.
We know that the majority of millennials in my generation, the majority of college-age women are pro-life, and we're going to continue on fighting for them.
Pro-choice groups feel momentum from the decision and promise to go after other states with strict clinic regulations, while pro-life supporters vow to not back down.
This is a rallying point on the presidential election. There are huge implications for the unborn in this next election, and I call on every pro-life American to make sure they vote. We're going to work very hard to make sure we have better justice and overturn this decision. We're not done.
Pro-life leaders say this decision confirms the importance of electing a pro-life president in 2016, since we know our next leader will appoint at least one new court justice. Reporting from the Supreme Court, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Well, the court also unanimously overturned the corruption conviction of former Governor Bob McDonnell. State and federal officials, both Democrat and Republicans, supported McDonnell. The friend of the court briefs were just extraordinary, and the justices agreed unanimously. Jennifer Wishon explains why.
After a nightmare that lasted for more than 3 years, Bob McDonnell, a Virginia statesman, is vindicated. The former Virginia governor's bribery conviction overturned by a unanimous vote in the land's highest court. Throughout the ordeal, McDonnell maintained he did nothing to betray the trust of Virginians. In a statement, he expressed his joy and gratitude. God strengthened and comforted me through the love and support of friends, family, and even strangers, through his abundant, miraculous, and amazing grace, and through the eternal truths of his holy word. These multiple acts of kindness have become the new tapestry of my life and have given me a vivid and indelible example of Jesus' admonition to live by the golden rule. A lower federal court convicted him of accepting lavish gifts in exchange for helping a Virginia businessman promote a dietary supplement. McDonnell says he did nothing in return for the gifts that he and his wife received.
The big question justices considered is, what is an official act by a public official? Prosecutors argue it's nearly any activity, but the court found the actions McDonnell was convicted on, setting up a meeting, talking to another public official, and arranging an event with nothing more, don't fit the definition.
Chief Justice John Roberts wrote the unanimous opinion. Our concern is not with tawdry tales of Ferraris, Rolexes, and ball gowns. It is instead with the broader legal implications of the government's boundless interpretation of the federal bribery statute. A more limited interpretation of the term official act leaves ample room for prosecuting corruption. Officials from both parties came to McDonald's defense. White House attorneys who worked in every administration, from Reagan to Obama, filed briefs on McDonald's behalf, along with both Democratic and Republican former attorneys general of Virginia. They were concerned the federal definition of public corruption would be so broad that people wouldn't know the difference between bribery and normal political activity, and they feared it could ultimately have a chilling effect on people working with politicians.
Under the government's position, officials might wonder whether they could respond to even the most commonplace requests for assistance, and citizens with legitimate concerns might shrink from participating in democratic discourse.
The court remanded McDonald's case back to a lower court to look at the facts using their more narrow interpretation of official act. So McDonald could be tried again, although it seems unlikely. After more than 20 years in public service, for now, he's enjoying being a grandfather. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, the Supreme Court.
Well, Jay Sekulow with the American Center for Law and Justice is with us now. And Jay, were you surprised at the fact this was a unanimous decision on the court?
Well, based on the oral arguments, I was optimistic. You know, in full disclosure, we filed a brief on Governor McDonald's behalf, and I was advising the governor along the way. So, just be clear there. But no, I was not shocked because Justice Breyer came out very aggressively against the government's position. The government took such an open-ended position on the issue of what constitutes official acts that every act of political life could be deemed subject to an indictment. And that's what we pointed out in our brief, the fact that this would change the way political discourse would take place in a constitutional republic, and that there was really significant First Amendment issues that would be implemented. So I think that, look, the court gave a very measured and narrow interpretation of what constitutes official acts. What Bob McDonald did does not meet those. I think the Fourth Circuit has no choice but to dismiss this case, and that's what should happen here. The bar that's been set for the government's very high, and frankly, I don't think they can meet it.
All right, what happens next? It goes back to the Fourth Circuit. The Fourth Circuit, in one decision, was relatively favorable to McDonald, and they turned around and went after him kind of hard. Well, how do you read that one?
Yeah. Well, I think the Fourth Circuit has to now apply the law as determined by the Supreme Court, and that changes the calculus completely. So the previous opinions in the case really are irrelevant. What becomes relevant now is based on the facts of the indictment, and there were clearly, if you look at the facts, setting up meetings, going to an event, talking to other executives within your government about a particular Virginia business, really cannot reach the level of an official act for the purposes of federal corruption statutes. So I think at the end of the day, the Fourth Circuit's going to be faced with, is there a sufficiency of evidence? And if there's not, they dismiss the case, and that's what they should do here.
Well, the poor guy is left in limbo. How long is it going to take before the Fourth Circuit will act?
Well, it could be relatively quick. I mean, the court could set a briefing schedule. We could have briefs done in the next 6 months and a decision, I think, early next year. But look, I think Bob McDonald. Let's not take away from this. The takeaway is Bob McDonald had a big win at the Supreme Court of the United States yesterday. So did his wife. And the fact is, 8 justices of the court said the Obama administration's prosecution of Bob McDonald for corruption is not right. It's not right under the Constitution. It's not right under the statute. And that really is a big victory. I would have loved to have seen the case completely reversed and the case be over. But that's tough in these cases, Pat. I mean, that'd be a hard one to get. You got a 1 out of 100 chance of that. But to get a unanimous court that says, look, official acts are narrowly construed, not this broad-based way the government's doing it, I think that bodes well for Bob McDonald's future. I hate the fact that they've got to deal with it for another year or so. But there's light at the end of this tunnel, and Bob McDonald comes out the victory. Certainly was the victory yesterday.
Jay, looking into the little darker side of the politics of this thing, there was a senatorial race. Ed Gillespie, who was virtually unknown in Virginia, almost beat the sitting senator. with no question,
Right.
Bob McDonnell would have won a Senate seat, which would have changed the balance in the United States Senate. Do you think, I mean, politics is involved in a lot of this stuff, and it may be the Obama administration, the Justice Department wanted to kill his chances. Do you think, is there any truth to that?
Look, I mean, it's you've been in this a long time, Pat. You ran for president of the United States and did a great job in running. Now, here's the reality. Bob McDonnell was on short list to be the vice president of the United States of Mitt Romney in the last go-round. I mean, there was no doubt about it. That's where this was going. You know, whether he would have picked Bob or not, we don't know, but he certainly was on the short list. Very well-respected governor, chairman of the Republican Governors Association, the RGA.
Yeah.
So this was a guy that was on the political ascent. Do I think politics played a part of this? I always think politics play a part of these prosecutions. So I don't think it'd be any different here. And I think at the end of the day, Pat, what we have is a situation where the government overreached again on an attempted prosecution, and they got slapped. And they really, what needs to happen here, frankly, is the government just needs to null process this case. They need to say, we're done. We're not going to, we don't think we can meet those standards. We're not going to try, and case over with, and not spend any more of the taxpayers' resources on going on a witch hunt against Governor McDonald.
You know, that attorney general in Maryland has been doing much the same thing against those police in that case of the man who was in the back of a police van, you know, bringing criminal charges against those guys. I mean, these prosecutors are out of control.
Well, they are, and here you have a situation where not only was there a drastic overreach, but look what this does to the individuals' lives. We mentioned, you know, our friend Bob McDonnell. I mean, 3 years, your life's put on hold. You go through a trial of the century, so to speak, in Virginia. You have an appeal. Finally, you get vindicated at the Supreme Court of the United States, and it's news for a day. Now, the fact is, you know, this is a vindication of Bob. I mean, and Bob McDonnell. The case is not over, but it is a vindication. And it's also a statement to prosecutors to not just prosecute for political motives. You better have a case. You better have evidence. And before you bring that case, you better make sure that evidence meets constitutional standards. It did not in Bob McDonnell's case.
Well, I appreciate your help, and I think with Bob, a lot of friends around him. Of course, his reputation was ruined. He's one of the best governors we ever had in Virginia. It was tarnished. He lost his law license. I mean, it was just a whole series of tragedies in his life. His marriage was in jeopardy. You hope and pray that somehow it'll come back together again, but it's tough.
Yeah. Look, God's the God of restoration. We know that. And I think God's also the God of vindication. And I think he was vindicated yesterday at the Supreme Court of the United States, Bob was, and I think the restoration comes now.
Jay, thank you so much. God bless you.
Thanks, Pat.
Terry.
Yeah, you know, a vindication is all well and good, but as you said, the residual of this is just wrong.
Well, all your family matters before the press and the headlines over and over again, humiliation on a man who was a distinguished public service, who was a straight hour if you ever had one. Mm-hmm. And suddenly he's called a crook. It just went on and on and on. Hey, by the way, we didn't mention that decision there in Texas. I think it's just awful. You know, a woman can have her uterus punctured. It happens. They can die from bleeding. It happens. These abortions sometimes are halfway done, and the infection of all kinds, sepsis breaks it. And the fact that the judges say, well, they can't go to a hospital that is reliable, and that Texas can't look after the health of women, and that the ability to have an abortion and kill a baby is more important than keeping the woman alive. That's what that decision says, and I think it's terrible.
Well, especially since we've seen that there is a money transaction and interest involved in all of this as well.
I mean, and Planned Parenthood is just the tremendous facilitator of abortions. Three judges, Thomas, Roberts, Alito, three of them. All the rest of the court, and I don't know what it is with Kennedy. I mean, you never know with him. But this election, if Thomas resigns, dear me, they've got the Scalia's seat and Thomas. But I don't know if if some of the other liberal judges are having thoughts of resigning. But the next president, it's going to be touch and go. But you see what could happen in America with 3 or 4 unelected judges what they can do to change the moral fiber of our nation. We have slaughtered over 55 million unborn babies in this country, and we're going to pay a terrible price as a nation for allowing that. And when it's sanctioned and approved of it by the highest court in the land, then we all stand responsible for it. And we will pay, all of us as a nation, because the Supreme Court and the President and the leaders of our country have said that's what they want. And those unborn babies are going to be crying out. Their blood will cry out against us as a nation. And one of these days, what's going to happen is going to be horrible. So this is the law. You can talk about the law. It's legal to have an abortion, Roe versus Wade, and so forth. But what is happening is the slaughter of the unborn is exceeding in America the slaughter in any nation I am aware of in the history of mankind.